Okay, been drying for a couple of hours, so it's nice and handleable and all the rest of it. Because I said, the last thing you want to do is leave fingerprints in this stuff, so it's something to think about. Now, as you can see, well, hopefully you can see, we've got that nice blotchy look now. It's taken shape and taken hold, so it just breaks up. Now, if you wanted to, obviously, if you're doing the normal grey version or the modern sort of low visibility grey the RF Tornadoes use, you would use exactly that technique. You wouldn't move on now to the other one. The only thing you might want to do is just make it a little bit stronger to really bring it up to speed. But certainly by the time you come back with washes and obviously some weathering and various bits and pieces, it's going to darken it down again. So remember, always go a touch lighter than you actually think, okay? So next up, obviously down below. Now, we've spoken about it a little bit, but this is our plan of action. Okay, it's very difficult to do like a freehand camo and have the hard edge. Now, you get various different types of camo work out there. You get soft edge camo, tends to be where it sort of blends in. You know, you get a weathered type of camo, and that's something we did with the Hind, so it was all done freehand. Okay, to get a hard edge camo freehand is extremely difficult, and there's lots of ways you can cheat it. Easiest one at all, take a plan like this, pop it into a scanner, okay, make it bigger to whatever scaling is correct for your model, okay, make a couple of copies, print it onto some good cardstock, okay, or a good thick paper, sort of, you know, at least 100 sort of GSM paper, cut it out, okay, and then you can use these templates and stick them directly onto your model, okay, and then that way you can sort of rotate it round, and then you plonk them down and you can tack them in place with small little balls, very small balls like this, onto your model, for instance, and then you can lay the paper on it. It gives a slight raised edge. You can just whip round and spray it all. That will give you an almost hard edge camo, okay? The other way of doing it, if you're using a good cardstock, cut it out, wet the card, place it on, let it dry, spray it, and then you can actually peel off the paper because it will physically stick to the actual model itself. It's a nice little technique to do, especially if you're doing chromes, alclad finishes, anything with a delicate finish, so you won't leave any residue or tarnish behind, okay? Other option, of course, use a low-tack tape. Again, put it down, go round, do all the areas, and then peel it off. The only trouble with that is, one's quite expensive because it'll take you a lot of tape. Secondly, getting to crimp around corners can be a little bit slow. But if you're using a thin type of tape, like something like we got these guys here, this is a 0.7mm, be a nice one. You could run it round, or certainly other tape manufacturers such as we got the Jammy Dog series of very thin tapes. You can go round and mask it up. Again, bit time consuming, bit expensive. The other way you can do it, obviously, is use this. Now, this is oil-free. Make sure it's oil-free tack, okay? Now, this is poster tack. You stick your posters to the wall with it and everything else. Biggest tip with this stuff is to warm it up. So what I do is basically stretch it like this, fold it in on itself, and just keep doing this for a couple of minutes. And what happens is it gets very warm. Actually, it gets pretty hot in your hand, okay? And this stuff warms up by tearing it, okay, and then folding it back in. And what will happen all of a sudden is it becomes very, very pliable. So your options with this one is, you could literally roll it out and then cut it to shape and stick them on. Perfect hard edge camo, away you go. Or you can do the worm technique. Now, we've covered the worm technique before on previous shows and everything else, but we haven't done it for a while, so I thought I'd come back to it again with this one. Okay, so what we're going to do is, you see, this is really easy to pull apart now. It's no problem. It's literally like a dough. And also, when you fold it back in on itself, it actually sticks without any joins. Okay, so literally you can pop it into a ball. Actually, it's really hot in my hand. You can roll it out and it sticks pretty seamlessly all to itself. Now, if you try and do that with a cold piece, one, it's really hard, but also if you try and pull it out and then you roll it, okay, then fold it on itself and roll it, you'll find it's really hard to get going, and you end up with joins in it and things like that, okay? And you don't want that. You want it to be nice and smooth, really pliable, okay? So it's really floppy and everything else, because it just helps out. And then it's just a simple case of making worms, which is always the fun bit. So you grab yourself a lump, screw them up into a ball, get it nice and hot between your hands, okay? Then you just roll it out to a thickness you're happy with, okay? I tend to go quite thick, and then you can push in and backfill with the extra, okay? So for instance, if we're doing the top, if we do the top of it, we're just going to work a couple of areas. So if we just work on this bit of the fuselage because it's a nice big area we can do. You can see we're going to be masking the grey. Okay, so if I put it down, so we're going to do this grey chunk in the middle, okay, which obviously is this bit here. So what we need to do is to work to the inside going out, all right? So we know this grey line is going to come down to here, which is obviously our join, all right? So we can do that, we can stick that down. So pushing slightly inwards, so in on itself, okay, we know it's going to come round and it's going to loop up, okay. Just looking for where that area is, so there it comes over. No, it doesn't, sorry. Yes, it does. Making sure you get it right. Okay, and then it's going to come down. Okay, you're pushing down, sticking it as you go. Okay, then it's going to come across. Just looking for where that air section is behind it. Actually, this one comes slightly higher, and that is the thing with this. You can push it around and you sort of knead it to how you want it. Okay, and then it's going to stretching him out now so we can make him fit. It's going to come along and it's going to go to about there. Okay, and then we're just going to go around, and because we want a hard edge camo, we're going to push it quite a lot in. Okay, now the idea is if you wanted a nice soft camo, all right, you would want a really big thick worm. So when you look at it up on the upright, you've got the edge here as it shoots, there's a gap underneath here, that allows it to go fuzzy. But obviously the smaller it is, okay, so something like this here, the smaller it is, when you pop it down, it's almost a wall, okay? You need a little bit of a curve because we don't want it to be totally hard edged and everything else, okay? So we're happy how that goes. Now the great thing about this is you can sort of knead it in just a little bit to reposition it, and if you didn't like it you can pull it off and obviously start again and all of those areas. So the next one we've got, we might as well do now, this guy down here we can take out because it's all grey, so we don't have to worry about that, so we'll leave him out of the way for the moment. And the next one is the one that's going to go up there, so we're just going to pull. So you want to get it roughly to how you go, but you're going to drag it out and make it a little bit longer. Okay, so for this guy, what we're going to do is we're going to start him in here. Okay, and then it's pretty much a straight line all the way up. When we get to this area here, we know it's going to dink in just a little bit, so we're just going to give it a little bit of a nudge there. Okay, and then as it comes round and out, okay, it's going to come push around this guy, then it's going to come up, so we're just sort of kneading and bending as we go. Don't touch the other bit because otherwise you'll find it'll cause you problems. Okay, so that's going to come up, it gets up to about here, and then it's going to bend over, and it comes sort of 90 degrees back out, gets quite close to this edge. So now we're sort of stretching and bending, doesn't go quite to that edge, so we're just going to pull him in back a little bit. Okay, it's going to come sort of back in on itself. Down and out. Okay, now you see this is all a little bit lumpy here, then this is where the good bit comes in. You have a little bit of fun, you can gently mould it back in, and then you can over push to sort of blend it in. And yes, I haven't finished the nose weight to wedge it in yet. Okay, but you can just sort of maneuver it around. So if you're in a situation like here and you want to make it a bit bigger, we can just give it a nudge and we can sort of push it out. If you want to pull it in, we're just going to drag it in a little bit, and now we're just going to push it back out. Okay, all the way around until we're really happy of how it is. So I'm just going to maneuver this back out, and then we're going to roll on top just to push it in a little bit. And you can use this technique all over, and this is the bonus of doing this. If you were doing, for example, the taped version, Tamiya taped, if you're not happy with it, you've got to peel it up and put it back each time, okay? And it can be quite a bit of a chore doing all of that, okay? So now we're going to look down and we're just going to see how we're going. I do must admit, want to move this one a little bit more. So we're just going to push it out. It's more of a sweeping curve than anything major. Then this guy in here, and again perhaps this here, we'll just make it a little bit different. Okay. Okay, and that's the thing with this, you can maneuver it and mould it as you like. Okay, then we can just look at how it's going to come down the front, and amazingly it doesn't. When I say amazingly, I am amazed it doesn't come down the front of the intake, but it doesn't, it stops on top of the intake. So what I'm thinking is it's a bit of a faux pas there, because I know for a fact it does. That means I would suggest the instructions are wrong, purely because when you see the camo pattern for the nose on the close-up, you can see, well, this is the area we're doing. We've got a green bar and it goes to here, but apparently there's nothing there. I would be inclined to think, well, actually there is, and I would certainly definitely be inclined to sort of fix that problem, because when you flip over you can see this is the area. So don't take too much notice of the instructions sometimes, because they can lead you astray. Okay, so I'm going to carry this over and take it right down. So what we can do, we can show you this one. So temporarily I'm just going to mask this, but normally you would carry on and do everywhere. Obviously I don't want to bore you to death by taking hours to do this, so we're just going to do a very quick mask. Okay, just all over this, just touch that down. Okay, and we'll show you about actually spraying this stuff, because that is quite important. This guy we're going to take off as well. Now, up the fin is a little bit of an adjective, but for the moment I'm just going to mask off this part of the fin so we don't go all over the place. Alright. So we've just got to do this bit round the corner here. So we just warm this up, and this one, as I say, if you rotate your instructions, trust me, it makes it a lot easier. Now for this one, I have to be honest, I've already done the tailplane, so I'll show you in a moment, but there is a reason for this, because I need to line up the painting so it's all the same. Okay, so we're just going to pop that on there like that, and then grab ourselves a pen, warm it up. Now this little guy is going to go same place on the tail. It's going to just slightly nick across the front of this area here, but I can do that all as a separate. Okay, then we know how that's going to end up. Okay, so I can take care of all of that in a moment. Now in here we've got knocked up. This is just a straightforward 50-50 mix of the green. Okay, I haven't got much in here, so we've got. But what you want to do when we come in to spray this, we just move all these guys out of the way. Well, you want to keep it 90 degrees above and spraying in circles. Okay, so check your flow. Happy. Okay, in from the top, just like this. Okay, and then if you do circles, you should end up with a very even coat. Okay, now this guy's just back here, we just need to pull that back. Again, little circles. Pretty sure it's going to be green up here, so get rid of that. Get it off. So we're just going to backfill this top. Okay, so we'll just draw it back. Normally now you would wait at least 20 minutes before coming in to do this, but because we want to show you, literally we're just going to pull this off. So if you use a low-tack tape, you shouldn't have any problems with it sticking, and then I'm making sure you pull away. then we end up with our camo pattern, just like that. And as you can see, you get a nice, smooth, soft edge to it all. And okay, we've got a little bit of overspray here, but that's just me speeding on with it. But the idea being is, with this nice smooth camo, it gives you that sort of half and half type of finish to doing all the work on this one. And then obviously, to show you what we've got, we've gone for this back part, this one here we're doing here. Okay, and at any point, the great thing as well is you can add to it. So if you weren't happy with how it is, when it's totally dry, a little bit more tack on it and touch in a little area as you go. And really, that's it. It's as simple as that. You're just going to work your way right over the entire aircraft until you're finished. But remember, at any point, you can go back over it, you can mask up and everything else like that. So what I've done is, I've done all the fuel tanks already. We've got them all down here, all painted up, ready to go. We've got all the tailplanes and everything. So in theory, this guy now, I've got the right one on, should marry up with this guy quite nicely. Okay, so when it's in, obviously we've got to do the other bits, but there's our tornado colours all coming into life. It's not the quickest job in the world, and patience really is a virtue with this. Take your time with it, spray it down. Not happy, don't panic, just cover up and go back in again, okay? But just watch your overspray. So take another bit of spare tape, also you could use kitchen roll, whatever, to mask off areas perhaps you don't want to get any spray on at that moment, because it is a lot easier, like I've done myself, to get overspray. But hopefully you can see it's a nice smooth finish. It's not a rock hard finish like you get with a paintbrush, and it's certainly not faded like you get with something else, perhaps if you're doing freehand. So it's something in between. But if you're not very good at doing sort of this type of camo work, this is a great cheat, because as I say, you can come back, you can touch up and keep going over it as many times as you like until you got it right. Okay, hot out of the spray booth, we've basically moved on with this one. As you can see, we've done a little bit of work around the front end. It's one of those things, I've adjusted this probably 3 or 4 times, different areas. For instance, to be honest, up this front end here, wasn't very happy. I had it sort of snaked around and it sort of came a bit more up this way. Didn't like it, so basically tacked it and then just went over it with grey again. Same with this one down here, wasn't too happy with the shape of it, so I re-tacked it and went over it with the grey. And again with this one, checking it in references, it looks like when the pipe was put in, it changed to camo pattern and everything else like that, so I redid it, okay, right the way through. And I'll just take these tailplanes off because I'm worried about them being knocked off, okay, but generally, that's the thing with it. Don't panic too much. If it doesn't look right, the camo patterns, you can just go back time after time and just adjust them, and then think, right, we want to move it this way, we want to move it that way, and everything else. That's why we didn't pre-shade it, because if you pre-shaded it, moving it around, you'd lost all your pre-shading and everything else. So what we want to do is a small little bit of weathering for this one. Now we've finished up that area. So here it is down here. We're just going to grab a little bit of kitchen roll. We're not going to need tons for this because we're only doing some light touch-ins. And what I've got here is we've got a little bit of grey paint just literally left over in the colour cup. So we're going to thin it, okay, just a little bit. Okay, so we're thinning it probably around about 75%, because yes, you guessed it, what we're actually going to do is go over the green with grey. Now the idea being, because it is so thin, that you're not going to cover the actual green work. All you're going to do is lighten it by literally this little film. Usual thing, check your brush, make sure you can see your hairs come through it immediately. That's always a good clue that you've got a nice thin mix and it's not going to wreck anything, okay? Now, if you wanted to, you could lighten it, but we're going to do it over 2 stages. First of all, we're going to go around with this one, then we're going to lighten it up and go around everywhere else with it. Now, this is where a lot of people will panic, because they'll think, you know, my God, you know, going over your paint work with grey, it's going to wreck it and everything else. Trust me, it'll be fine, because it's nice and thin. Now, okay, what you should be looking for is really it doesn't cling to the side of your colour cup particularly well, okay? If it clings to it, you might cover a little bit more. Start on the grey, obviously, don't go straight onto the green, because you can check exactly how it is. But what you can do now is take out any little bits of, perhaps you've got some shadowing, you've got a little bit of overspray, you can take care of that. But remember, this is going to be very, very thin. So, because it is so thin, we're turning down the air pressure a little bit, probably down to around about 12 to 15 psi. And then all we're going to do is come in like this, and we're just going to do the centres of these panels, okay, and we're really looking to see how it is actually looking on there. Now we're pretty sure that that's nice and thin and it's not going to affect literally too much. At the moment, to be honest, I'm just taking care of little bits of shadowing we've got, we can actually move on to the green. Remember, obviously if you put lots down, you're going to cover it, so just take your time, okay, and literally just sparingly going over. So we're literally centers of these green panels, stay away from panel lines, but certainly you can actually do the edge if it's a little bit fuzzy. Okay, so this way what it will do is just slightly lighten this green and give it a sort of weathered look. Okay, so we're just going to do these centers. But as I said, we're avoiding the panel lines, so it works a little bit like that grey situation we had. Okay, right the way around here, and hopefully you can see it's starting to wear it in just a little bit. Alright, just don't panic too much because we're going to come back with the original green just to give us our nice contrast as we make our way round. Okay, so this way it should just give us a little bit more of a texture. So remembering this, we're doing all right the way over. So we're doing the panels as well as the green, all literally in one. Okay, then because we've done it there, what we're doing is a little blast right the way over. The idea with putting this on is so it textures everything the same, okay? Because we're going to use washes and kind of come back with darker colours on this. What's actually going to happen is the entire thing's going to go darker, so don't worry too much about it, okay? So we just up our air pressure. This is just to dry it back, but hopefully now it's just going to give us a more sort of muted look all over. So I'm just going to do some of these little grey areas on this side a little bit, so just turning it down. Really happy with that, so we can just flip this over now and we can do this green one on this side. Got a fingerprint right here, so we can give that a little blow over. Don't worry too much about it, and the reason I'm worried about it is because we're going to actually mottle that to hell with a nice exhaust staining on it. To be honest, I've already done the underside, so you can see the underside's a little bit more faded down and everything else like that, okay? And we're getting quite low on colour, so we're just doing a quick blow over literally all like that. Okay, so we're happy how that is now, so now what we're going to do is literally going to come back with the original green thinned, okay? And we're going to do the same thing, and then that way we're actually going to run around all the panel lines. So hopefully by going around all the panel lines, it'll be nice and bleachy, okay? And this will give us a nice sort of, you know, warm look to it all, okay? But the idea being, as you can see, I'm not cleaning out the colour cut. We're going to take a little bit of the grey and the green, so we get a contrast in the colour. So again, looking to see your bristles. To be honest, that's a little bit thick. So we're just going to add a little bit more thinners. Don't trouble with these big bottles. And I've got far too much paint, I only need a dribble. Okay. So that's all of that. Okay, taking that out. Alright, I'm just going to blow through. So we've got the nice thin stuff coming through. Again, always cleaning your needle, checking your needle area, making sure, because obviously if it spits and that, it can cause little bits of problems. So if we just flip it over. Okay, you can see down here what we're going to try and achieve. Alright, so if I find some tape, just to hold this up, and something to wedge it on the other side in case it decides to come back. Okay, so this, same thing, nice low air pressure, and we're just going to go in, and we're just doing those areas where we want to make little joins. Now, we got down here, you might see, what we need to do is just mottle it a little bit, so we're just going to pop around, but basically this is to follow panel lines and make it look a little bit more green, okay? So we've got some in there, got a little bit of detail there. Okay, a bit of detail there, a bit in there. Now we're just going to mottle about, so we're just going to putting in a shaky hand job. all over this. Alright, then we do this guy just in here. And so it's actually a little bit thick, this paint, okay? Just come across here. But because it's thin, it gives you this ability to go right over it and not have to worry too much about it, okay? So now we're just making a little pass over this just to darken it all up and to give us our sort of darker feel. But you can see there in the light the difference where we've been and where we haven't, and that's because again you've got a different texture. It's very glossy paint, obviously this is the gun stuff, so you might need to pop over it to mute it down. But all this is doing is fading in all these colours. So you say at the moment this is just for panel lines, okay, and then you're just going to mottle in between just to knock it all about a little bit. But hopefully it's just a little bit too thin to make any mass difference, okay? And that's all you're trying to do with it, is just to work it around and away. So we're just going to do this side as well. Okay, hopefully it'll be alright. Alright, so we're just going to pop in. But again, this is just this thing of breaking it up, making it a little more natural. Now, as we said before, this is going to be a lot darker when we come in with the washes and stuff like that. It's going to darken it up, so don't worry about being that fraction bit lighter perhaps, because that can cause real problems. Okay, so we're just going to pop in here, around these front bits. Okay, we're just going to pop down these guys. And so the tail area, we've got some big plans for this to do that nice staining job that they get, so don't worry too much about it. It's just to sort of generally break it up a little bit. Now again, this fingerprint, we're going to go over it again just to blend in. And that tail. Okay, just around these rear hatches. And so don't be worried about running around it 2 or 3 times just to change it all a little bit, but hopefully now it's giving it another sort of dimension and another look. And then obviously you're going to need to do the same with all your other things. So literally I'll run round and do all the other bits, but that's the thing, just popping around and doing all those areas. If you wanted to, then you can add a little bit of grey to this and then go back and do other things, and you sort of come back and forth until you've got it happy in exactly what you want and everything else. Same time, you might notice leading edges of the wings in here I've actually painted. I hope this is dry to touch, and I've done the same for the undersides, literally just with the base colour in there. It looks a little bit lighter because obviously the weathering we're doing. And then we've got to do the same on here. I haven't painted this one yet, but I've done this one. So obviously we've done the top half of it, it's all painted, and the bottom half looks good down there as well. So you need everything to sort of blend in and try and all look the same. If you wanted to, you can obviously pick out a repair panel and just spray it, you know, usually a different colour, perhaps a primer type colour in the greys and things like that, really to liven it up. But all we're trying to do now is really just break it up and make it look faded, different textures and different sort of tones and things like that with the paintwork, just to break it all up and have it that sort of natural look. But certainly when we come back with weathering washes and all things like that, it's going to make it a lot different. So I'm going to carry on, just take care of a few little other bits and pieces we need to just touch up with this one and everything else, and then we can come back and we start to pick out some of these details, some of the metal areas around the exhaust, some black areas and things like that to add detail to it.